Hi everyone, welcome to the Birthing at Home podcast. I'm Elsie, your host. I've had 2 home births in April 2020 and recently in June 2023. I'm a mental health nurse and an ex-student midwife that still has a strong passion for birth and supporting women. This is the second episode for the Birthing at Home podcast. If you've already listened to the first birth story from Chantel, thank you so much. It has been so exciting hearing from people who have listened. Remember that if you want to share your birth at home story, whether that's home birth or free birth, please send me a message on the podcast Instagram, which is birthingathome_apodcast. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of the land I'm recording on in Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. I would also like to acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have been birthing at home on country for tens of thousands of years prior to the British invasion and acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. Today we get to listen to Ilona tell the birth story of Olive, who Ilona birthed at home in rural Queensland in Childers in May 2022. Childers is about 3.5 hours north of Brisbane, and as the crow flies, so to speak, roughly 130 kilometres west of Gari, formerly known as Fraser Island. When Ilona reached out to me, she described it as the most amazing experience. So I'm so excited to hear all about it. Welcome, Ilona, and thanks so much for being the second guest on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we're actually, as a disclaimer, we're recording this at night. That is the life of mums. Ilona, we just caught up before the podcast and Ilona's hiding out in her car. I mean, that is actually probably a good location to record a podcast. It's kind of like a mini studio.
Yeah, I think the acoustics in here are quite nice. And it's just
Yeah.
quiet time for me.
Yeah, nice.
Escape.
You can like recline as well. Yeah, so thank you so much. So I guess maybe can you give it a little background to who you are? You said you live in Childers at the moment.
Yeah, yep. So I'm Ilona and my partner is Jock, and we've got Olive who's now 16 months old. And we're living in Childers, which is about 3 hours north of Brisbane. And we're just about to move to the sunny coast, to be back with family and just a bit more support. So I originally came to Childers for work. I work as a paramedic, and then thanks to COVID, Jock was able to work from home, so that was quite useful.
Yeah.
And then, we just kind of found ourselves here, and there's no like maternity services or anything in town. I'd kind of run into that before, like at work, sort of picking up labouring women and sort of being like, oh, we'll just run to the hospital town. It's like, oh, we can't go
Yeah.
there. We have to go 40 minutes away to Bundaberg.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I kind of already knew that before falling pregnant, but then it was just kind of like, oh, I don't know what I want to do. But that kind of just, I guess, led us down a path of seeking out a private midwife.
Yeah. So, how many people actually live in Childers?
2,500.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So that's, I mean, I also have grown up in a very small country town in New South Wales. But like I now live in Melbourne and there's 5 million people that live here. So and we still have trouble with midwives in Melbourne. So I like, oh my gosh, first let's start with, so you're a paramedic. I don't know, obviously I'm a nurse, but I don't know too much about paramedicine, although, you guys are involved with emergencies and stuff, and especially when you are living in a rural, remote area, I suppose a lot of the time you guys are involved in women's labours, like getting people to hospital last minute. Like, how does that go?
I mean, most people are pretty on top of, I guess, the care they've sought out. So if they know that they're going to Bundaberg, I think they probably end up driving in maybe a bit earlier,
Wow.
so that they don't have that awful car drive. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so
It's kind
um,
of a situation where, I mean, I don't know too much about it, but it seems like a situation where home birth would be 100% preferable.
yeah, for
Unless
me,
you have like
that's
high risk factors and stuff. Like,
yeah.
how far away is Bundaberg?
So 40, yeah, 40 minutes if you're doing well, like if there's no
Yeah.
roadworks and but it's certainly like there's roofs and yeah, it's
Yeah.
a drive that you have to be quite aware of.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess from like my involvement as a paramedic, I've been doing that for 10 years now, and I've been involved with one birth. And that was like in the corridor at the hospital, like we just got there. So
Yeah.
yeah, so nearly made it. And then um, the second one was from Childers, and same thing. I think she birthed on our stretcher just as we'd got into
Wow.
maternity. But it's so tricky, I guess. You know, if you were able to look into a little glass ball and know that these women were going to birth so close to arriving at hospital, like maybe you would encourage them to just stay at home and birth in a really safe, stable environment as opposed to being so close to birthing but being in the back of the car.
Yeah.
The back of an ambulance is not where you want to have a baby.
No.
So
No.
yeah, it's definitely we'd rather not see babies in the back of our cars.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it's usually just if people have just timed it a bit poorly or their labour is quite precipitous and
Yeah.
yeah, it all just goes from 0 to 100 quite quickly. Otherwise, you go in the very early stages of labour, it's like, sure, come on in, and they don't end up birthing for hours. But that's also
Yeah.
fine.
So I'm very curious to hear, how did you find a private midwife that would come, like, tell me that story.
Well, so she actually lives 20 minutes down the road from
Oh my
me,
gosh.
which was just crazy. So yeah, like I was just quite fixed on a water birth and I was happy to do that in hospital, but Bundaberg Hospital doesn't offer that. You can labour in water, but you can't birth in water. So I was like, righto,
Oh.
well, I need to find somewhere I can birth in water. And a friend
Yeah.
had just had a home birth and spoke really positively about it. So I was like, righto, let's see who I can find. And I just hopped on the Home Birth Australia or Home Birth Queensland website and I found a midwife. And yeah, I think I emailed her and she's like, yeah, sure, like I'm available. I'll just make sure you get a referral to me and I'll see you at like 12 weeks. And so
Yeah.
that's what we did. And she just came to the house. Um, that first appointment actually timed that my parents were here. They're currently traveling around Australia. And so they just happened to be here. So they got to
Yeah.
meet her. Jock just took that time off work. So he got to meet her. I think he um, was a little like, okay, I've got some questions to ask her, just to make sure
Yeah. Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
all good. But
Yeah.
yeah, he was after that. He was like, yeah, heck yeah, that's this is how
Yeah.
we're doing
That's
it.
amazing. So
Yeah,
before you'd kind of run into this problem of, you know, you wouldn't be able to actually give birth in water, had you ever considered home birth before?
no, I don't think so. I certainly remember at uni, sort of doing our obstetrics part of my degree and just sort of being like, right, I'm going to have a cesarean because that's really scary and I don't want to birth. Like that's
Yeah.
really frightening. But um, gosh, it's awful to have thought that, I think, for quite some time. And I know a lot of my colleagues have similar views, but unfortunately, we are just bombarded with all the things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah.
in my 10 years, I've only had, yeah, those two births and they've been absolutely fine. And I
Yeah.
know that there is intervention needed sometimes, but yeah, unfortunately, we've just got this really medicalized view of birth. And I think when, like, I'm going to these really awful cases where people are crashing cars and they're having heart attacks and whatever else. Like there's always something wrong, and this is
Yeah.
the only time where there's not anything wrong,
Yeah.
and
You're
it's really hard to get out
generally
of.
completely healthy.
Yeah, it's really hard to get out of that headspace. So I certainly remember at uni just sort of being like, and sort of being told like, oh, home birth is like, there's doulas and that's really unsafe, and more as like you might get called to this scene and you need to take charge and you need to tell this woman that she's going to hospital, and just really
Wow.
awful. I certainly remember just being like, oh my God, like, they're witches, burn them at the stake.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, really terrible, a terrible view. And thankfully, I guess that just slowly changed over time. Maybe as
Yeah.
some of my friends started having babies, and I started learning about some really poor experiences that people had had in hospitals.
Yeah.
Um, and then, yeah, I think this friend having birthed her baby at home, just and hearing about like how they sort of went about that, and that the midwives just kept coming to do all the appointments at home, and just how relaxing it was. It was just like, God, there's no other way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm very glad. Even looking back on it now, like even I think if Bundaberg did have the option to birth in water, I think I eventually would have picked to birth at home instead anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Jock, do you remember like what, I guess, preconceived ideas he had about home birth, or was it sort of similar to what you initially had, that, it's a pretty alternative, it's a bit
Yeah.
dangerous?
I think it was just fortunate that this friend who did have the home birth, um, I guess if we're claiming friends, they're actually his friends first.
Yeah,
Now they're mine.
excellent.
But I think, yeah, for Jock to hear about our friends' experience, and especially from the guy's point of view, from the partner's point of view, he yeah was just kind of like, oh, like, sure, um
Yeah.
yeah, whatever is going to make you feel safest. Yeah, I think that his biggest concern was just like, okay, but at what point do we decide, like, if we need to step in and have some intervention and transfer, like at what point, like what are the cutoffs, sort of thing.
Yeah.
That was kind of his biggest concern. But once that was all sort of communicated, and yeah, he's a mechanical engineer, so very like brainy, very
Yeah.
smart, and I think for him, yeah, he just very much wanted things on paper, like a birth plan on paper, like if this,
Yeah.
then that, and just like he kind of made a little flow chart for himself of just like, right, I know how to advocate for you. If we end
Yeah.
up in hospital, I know what to do. And
Wow.
once he'd, because I was like, whoa, like you just need to calm down a little.
Calm
But
down.
he really needed that. He felt he needed that.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be able to be like, hey, like I know what I'm doing and I feel really good about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was just I feel like you just learn so much more about each other in that preparation for birth, and yeah, I really quite enjoyed that side of it too.
Yeah, nice. So, so the midwife, she lived 20 minutes away. Is that right?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she started seeing you from like 12-ish weeks.
Yeah, I think it was around 12 weeks she did like the booking appointment, and I think just sent my details through to Bundaberg Hospital as well, just so they knew I existed, just in case
Yeah.
I ended up ever popping in.
Yeah.
But they never contacted me, which was all good. And then I think I just saw the midwife. Oh, I can't even recall. She was just kind of like, I think there was a set amount of visits she wanted to do, and it was more so to like build a relationship and really get to know each other. So I think initially it wasn't even monthly. It was just kind of because I was still working, like, so I was doing shift
Yeah.
work. So I was sometimes available, sometimes not. She was
Yeah.
sometimes at birth, sometimes not. So yeah, I definitely recall after 20 weeks, we saw her more frequently, maybe monthly. And
Yeah.
then maybe at the very end, it was like maybe once a fortnight. But she kind of ended up just leaving it on me and just being like, just message me when you want to see me again. If I don't
Oh,
hear
that's
from
so
you,
cool.
then
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
just
yeah.
book you in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
think
that
that
was
really
super sweet.
demonstrates like that she has trust in your body and your
Yeah.
um when something's not right kind of thing. Hi everyone, I'm just editing and unfortunately there was a bit of an audio glitch here, so that's why it sounds disjointed. Anyway, I hope you're enjoying listening to Ilona's birth story.
Yeah, no.
So she saw you kind of just whenever you needed.
Yeah.
The first 20 weeks, like I find this story so interesting because like did you have any scans?
Yeah, so I did. So before I'd had my care referred over to the midwife, I saw the GP and she was kind of like, right, your options are shared care, private obstetric care, or just rock up at the base. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, but this is what I'm doing. And she was like, oh, you can do that? I was like, uh, yes. Can you just sign it? And then she
Yeah.
actually ended up referring a whole bunch of people to
Oh
my midwife,
wow.
and she's like, "What did you tell this doctor? Like, does she realize that
Who I
I
am?
support people to birth at home? Like, do they all want to birth at
Yeah.
home? No.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so I've heard of people running into dramas with their GPs not referring them on. So I feel like I was
Yeah,
very
I was
fortunate.
certainly told for my first home birth I didn't need a referral for some reason, but for my second I did, and I had read a lot of things that said basically just little detail as possible. So
Yeah.
I just went and was like, "Oh, can you sign this?" essentially.
Yeah,
But
so awful that yeah, people are
yeah.
running into that and really excited about this birthing option and then just hitting a brick wall. But anyway,
Yeah.
thankfully I didn't have to deal with that. So I
Yeah,
had a
nice.
6 week scan. I'm a twin, so that was also
Yeah.
just to count how many babies there were. There's only
Yeah, yeah,
one.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and then did a 12 week, but it was certainly like that period between like 6 weeks and 12 weeks. Like I um, really didn't experience many symptoms at all.
Yep.
I got a little bit nauseous if I hadn't eaten, and I was all of a sudden motion sick, which had never happened before. So we um, ended up going on a bit of a boat trip, and I
Oh
vomited
no.
the whole
Oh
time for like
no.
10 days. Anyway, that
For
was,
10 days?
yeah, yeah. Sometimes
Oh
we're fine,
no.
and other times it was just like, this isn't as fun as it should have been. But anyway, it was
Oh
still
my
great.
gosh.
And then I found I was actually getting car sick in the back of the ambulance. So I thought it was going to be a giveaway for whoever I was working with because I wasn't doing my paperwork because I just couldn't have my
Ah.
head down. I had to watch the road. And
Yeah.
then my sense of smell was really, really strong. So I was smelling all these UTIs and like infections and
Oh.
just like, oh,
Oh,
it was
gross.
quite crazy. But
Yeah.
yeah, the guy I was working with didn't even bat an eyelid. He had no idea. It
Yeah.
was quite funny.
I
But
think we all get in our heads about that, they gotta know, but
yeah,
everyone's too
really got to
concerned with
know.
themselves.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, so then we just did the 20-week scan, which I ended up doing twice, which was actually kind of nice. So I took my mum to the first one, and Olive was just being a bit pesky, and they
Yeah.
couldn't see some of the views. I think looking at it now, I'd probably just be like, "Don't worry about it. She's still there. She's having a good time. I'm not
Yeah.
worried." But um, I was quite thrilled with seeing her. We didn't know she was her at
Yeah.
that point, just the um, whoever it was. And
Yeah.
then, so because I had to go back and do it again to get the different views, I actually took Jock's mum. So it was just nice that I got to take
Yeah.
kind of both mums.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that was good because he'd come to the first two, so he's kind of like, no, no, like let other people have a turn.
Somebody else have a turn. Yeah.
Yeah, and then yeah, I didn't do any more scans, and even that, like, I was like, oh, that feels fine. Like by that point, I was feeling her move around, and um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
just
had
had
the motion sickness kind of stopped.
yeah,
Yeah.
thankfully, yeah,
Yeah.
it had,
Nice.
and then QAS so that's the ambulance service I work for. They just have a quite strict. Or yeah, just they're very mindful of their pregnant people.
Yep.
And so at 28 weeks, I switched from clinical duties to like office duties.
Yep.
Um, so that was probably quite good because at that point I feel like I changed uniform. Like I had to either wear a slightly bigger uniform or we've got a set maternity uniform. And it felt like I was more obviously pregnant.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think I was happy to sort of switch at that point. But I ended up getting, because I was then sitting all the time, I got really quite bad tailbone pain.
Oh,
But
of
that was,
course.
it was good because it made me link in with a women's health physio, um,
Yep.
and then who I then saw after birth. Um,
Yeah.
so that was as much as it was a bit uncomfortable, that was probably good to just get that in motion. And
Yep.
she kind of thought it was probably just because my pelvic floor was a bit tight. So just to really work on relaxing, and that then triggered me to go into like the spinning baby stuff. So that was, yeah, it was all quite good
Wow.
that we'd do sort of inversions at night time and like
Yep.
side lying,
Super
and I never
fun.
sort of sat back in the couch like this baby's going to be so optimally positioned.
Yeah.
But and then like I just found that interesting because I'd talked to friends about, they're like, spinning what? Like what are you doing to the baby? Like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. Which yeah, I just think everyone should know about that.
Yeah.
And um, yeah, they don't. But anyway, that's fine. I'm here to tell
Yeah,
everyone about it.
yeah, that everybody go search spinning babies. I put it in the show notes from Chantel's birth story in the first episode as well, because she also mentioned it. And I
Yeah.
know about it. I think probably in the, like, I guess, community of home birth, it's pretty well known, but I'm not sure if other health services are
Mm,
pushing it as
yeah.
much.
Yeah, no, and yeah, it's just kind of, it's so easy, and we found it a really good way to just kind of touch base with each other. So for me and Jock, and sort of figure out like, oh, this one can actually be used in labour too. So if I say,
Yeah.
Jock, shake my apples, it's like, righto,
Yeah.
he knows what
Yeah,
he's
with the
doing.
rebozo and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so no, we found that, yeah, that was a really nice time. Um,
Yeah.
just to connect with each other, and yeah, with the pregnancy, and just yeah, touch base. So no, I was, yeah, very fortunate all pregnancy just to be quite all right. I do some cycling, and I was still, I think my last bike ride was at 36 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I definitely reduced I just felt like my lung capacity was really, really
Yep.
small. Um,
Yep.
so yeah, it definitely got to a point where it's like a bit uncomfortable. I had to switch from my road bike to my mountain bike just to fit on the
Yep.
bike. Um,
Yeah. Oh
but
my
yeah,
gosh.
it was just nice to sort of keep active, and yeah, still just feel like I was fine.
Yeah. I'm so
Yeah,
jealous that you got to keep cycling. I also like cycling, but the thought, I was also quite sick, but just the thought of like having, like, I was like, how would that work with my belly and like pedaling? And I can't wear cleats, I don't think, because how am I going, like, how is this going to work?
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
well done.
No, it's certainly a challenge. And I did have moments where I just felt quite guilty of like, oh, if I do fall off and I hurt myself or hurt the baby, like how is that going to make me feel? How are people going to perceive that?
Yeah.
But I guess for my own sort of mental health and just keeping that part of my identity, I was like, no, I think I'm going to keep doing that. And I'm going to make sure that I'm riding with someone and not on busy roads, and just sort of, yeah,
Yeah.
risk manage.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
And I guess that's what we do all the time. But then when it comes to pregnancy, for some reason, it's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, you're taking that risk. Why are you
Yeah.
taking all these risks?
Yeah.
It's
I
just
get
like
to,
so different.
yeah.
So you went to office based duties when you were 28-ish
Mm.
weeks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when did you finish up work?
So again, the policy is kind of that you finish up by 34 weeks,
Yep.
which by that point I was pretty happy to do that.
Yep.
So we've got uh, some mat leave like through work. So that was all good. I just ended up taking that at half pay, so I didn't mind starting that a little bit earlier
Yep.
because I knew it would go for a little while, which is yeah a very privileged position to be in. But yeah, I just sort of we had done some painting in the house, so I kind of just finished the
Nice.
painting off and
Yep.
yeah, taking dogs for walks and just yeah, really enjoying that time. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that was good. We were building a carport
Okay.
next to our house, and so we kind of had to change some fencing. So I was very stressed because our dogs were not in like the yard they should have been, and one jumps and one digs. So I was like, they're just gonna
Ah,
escape.
yeah.
So I kept saying to Jock, I was like, I'm not going into labour until that fence is done.
Uh,
And it didn't get done on the weekend I thought it was going to get
yeah.
done because there was Easter and a couple of long weekends with like May Day. And anyway, then it got done and I went into labour the next day. So I
Oh
told
my
you
gosh.
I
So,
couldn't get done.
in the lead up to that, did you have like any signs of labor?
So I didn't think so. The midwife had visited and she at one point was just like, oh, are you still feeling lots of movement? I was like, oh, definitely. She's like, oh, you're just measuring like your fundal height is maybe not. She's like, it's just quite similar to when I last saw you. So either for some reason baby's kind of stopped growing a little bit or it's dropped.
Dropped.
And
Yeah.
so that's probably what it was. And then I was kind of like, oh, I'm not even getting any Braxton Hicks or anything. And I was like, oh, but sometimes like she just turns her back like completely to my front and my whole belly is just so hard. She's like, no,
Wow.
you goose, that's a Braxton Hicks. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
that's so
oh,
funny.
okay. I just had no
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so definitely in the maybe like 3 or 4 days. So um, I can't even, my estimated due date, I think was maybe the 29th of April. Um, so, and then I went into labour at 40 and 4. Um,
Yeah.
so, and my parents were here, and like mum was just doing the classic, like, oh, any signs, any like what's happening? And
Yeah.
I'm like, no, mum, nothing.
Yeah.
Um,
How did they all feel about you choosing a home birth?
I think they were all good. If they had any major concerns, they didn't voice that with me, which is probably a good thing. And because they were there with that first meeting with the midwife, I think they were just like, wow, she's so relaxed and just so
Yeah.
calm. Like, what an amazing presence to have.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, as far as Jock's family goes, they didn't say anything about it. I didn't have any. Oh, actually, I had, yeah, maybe a couple of people at work. I think, yeah, just that more medical mindset of like, you know, what if this, what if that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, I didn't have any negative comments, which was really good.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because that would be really challenging to navigate.
Yeah, I
But
can imagine.
yeah.
Um, so they were around at that same time.
Yes, so they were staying at a caravan park, like a little bit out of town, and they're like, anything happens, like let us know. And I was like, well, I don't know if I want you here or not, so
Yeah.
we'll just see what happens. But the morning I guess yeah, I just increasingly just kind of, I guess when I was having lots and lots of Braxton Hicks, and I was just starting to feel them just a little bit.
Yeah.
And then, so on the morning that I was 40 and 4, I just woke up and just, yeah, had the period cramping and was like, oh, maybe. And it was just like waking up on Christmas morning, just being like, oh
Ah,
my God, like something's
that's so
happening.
cool. Yeah.
And I had an appointment with the midwife the next day anyway. So
Yeah.
she was kind of like, righto, I'll just still see you tomorrow, if not before.
Yeah.
So yeah, because I'd let her know. And then, so throughout the day, I was like maybe having these like sort of niggly feelings, like maybe every 15 minutes, sometimes every half hour. Like I just washed out the little dog house and I made a chicken curry and just did all these things, and it's like future me is gonna love this. Like, really, just nurture yourself, girlfriend.
Yeah.
So that was so nice to have that build up because my friend who also had the home birth, she didn't get that. She just
Yeah.
kind of started labor and went full into labor, and so I
Wow.
think she was kind of like, I was waiting for that. So yeah, I was quite
Yeah.
thankful that I did have that. And then we also had organised a birth photographer, which was just wild that she also just lived not
Oh
far
my
down
gosh.
20 minutes down
Chilled
the
is
road.
this the place to be?
Yeah, it really is. It
Clearly.
was very surprising. There's a big between Bundaberg here and Harvey Bay. There is a big community here, which is just lovely.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I kept the midwife and the photographer kind of in the loop, and um, we already had the pool, so I ended up blowing that up, and then randomly, Mum was like, "Here, we're gonna drop you off some milk." Okay, like
Okay.
I
That's
don't
very
need
random.
milk, but like anyway, I think her mum's spidey senses were tingling, and so they
Wow.
came out, and I came out the front. I was like, "Righto, give me the milk, and you can
Give
go."
me your
She's like,
bloody milk.
"Oh, I'll carry it in for you." It's like, it's
Ah.
2 liters of milk, mum, because I guess I just didn't want them seeing the birth pool set up and like them being, "Oh my God, what's happening?" Anyway,
Yeah.
Dad saw it and he's like, "Oh, what's going on?" It's like, "Well, I just thought I should test it, like it took me a while to blow it up, and we can just put it in the corner of the room. It doesn't matter now. I'll just leave it there." Anyway, so I think they were kind of, "Yeah, righto. We'll
That's
we'll talk to you
hilarious.
later."
Is she going swimming?
Yeah,
Why is she going swimming in her house?
just relaxing. But Dad had already been like, "Do you think?" Because we're in quite an old house and
Yeah.
it's 2 story, and he's like, "Do you think the floor is strong enough?"
Oh yeah.
Dad,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I had no doubts in my mind, but now
Yeah,
I'm
now I'm
all of a
falling through the floor.
exactly. So thankfully, Jock the engineer was like, "No, it's
Yes.
going to be okay."
Excellent. Structurally sound.
Great. Yes, that was very good. But then our midwife ended up coming round. She just decided to have dinner at the pub in town, so she popped in just to be like, "How you going?" And just dropped off her medicines.
Yep.
And we actually didn't realize we didn't have a liner for the birth pool, so she dropped that off as
Oh.
well, which was
Had
really
you
good. And
bought the birth pool or just
no, so it
hired
was
it?
hers. So she
Oh,
just had
cool.
dropped it off like a week earlier, and we all just didn't realize the liner wasn't in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was good. I think that was the last piece in my brain that like I just needed that there, and then it's
Yeah.
like, right, I'm good to go now. So
Yeah.
that was like maybe 7, and then by
And this is still so you've woken up on the morning of 40 plus 4
yes,
and so this is still the same day.
yes, yep.
Yep.
So then it's that evening. Um,
Yep.
so kind of tried to eat some dinner, and we end up watching Coco, which is a really cute movie, and then we end up watching that on Olive's first birthday. That we're just like, man, it's a
Oh,
yearly tradition. We just watch Coco.
that is so cute.
Yeah. Anyway, and then so by the end of that, I kind of don't recall what happened. In the movie, I was just like, oh, oh, things are zesty. I'm feeling this now. This is moving,
Yeah.
and so just kind of kept in contact with Deb. She's like, have a lie down. I can't. I lay down. It's like, nope. And so Jock actually he's quite good with um photos, and so he had taken some photos, and it's just like it nearly looked like my belly was flat for a bit, and then the big pregnant belly, but like she'd just dropped so low.
Wow.
Like these photos are just so like interesting to look at,
Yeah.
because I didn't recall that at the time, but I ended up getting in the shower and was like, righto, this is it for me. I'm just going to stay here forever, and I'm never getting out again. And
Yeah.
Jock's kind of like, do you want to consider our hot water system? No,
Ah,
I don't care right now.
I'm
Like
gonna run
that's
it all out.
yeah. So I did.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
So I think, yeah, our midwife got there maybe around midnight, because Jock ended up calling and was just like, hey, like she's not really talking to me anymore.
Yeah.
She's very, I'd withdrawn by that point.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
yeah, I think, and she could hear me in the background. So she got there, the birth photographer got there, and then
Yeah.
yeah, she was just kind of like, hey, if you want your parents here, you might want to contact them soon. And then I really didn't know where I sat with that, so I was like, fine, like sure, let's contact them. And then they walked through the door. I was like, I don't want them here. Just
Yeah.
like, whoa, okay, wow. And things really slowed down by that point. It was maybe like 1 or 2 in the morning.
Yeah. Who did you
And
communicate that to? Did you tell them like straight up, I don't want you
no,
here? Or?
no, I was very much like too passive to sort of do that. And I think it
Yeah.
was just, like, yeah, everything had really slowed down. And the midwife was like, look, that's totally normal because you've got all these people in your space now. Like, it was just you before. Like, this is fine. Like, you're definitely having a baby. It's all good. Um,
Yeah.
and so I just like really withdrew and kind of went to different parts of the house and just was like a cat, like trying to find a nice
Yeah.
little dark space. And um, mum and dad kept following me.
Oh
Um,
no.
like
Ah.
you go now, like what are you doing? And I just and like it was so lovely, like, and I feel terrible for saying this because we're really proud of you and you're doing so well, and like that's
Oh, they were
beautiful
just
thing.
trying to
It's like
help.
to me.
Oh, yeah, that's
Terrible.
tough.
Anyway, so Jock ended up finding me, but at this point I was in our guest room, which was definitely not where I was planning on being, but um
Yeah.
yeah, he came and found me. I was like, "You need to tell mum and dad to go," and he's like, "Heck no!" Like, I'm not
Oh
having
my
that
gosh.
conversation. So he's like, I'll talk to the midwife." So she came in. I was like, "They've got to go," and
Excellent.
she's like, "Righto." She's very assertive. Jock and I are
Yeah.
just too passive.
Yeah.
So she's like, "Also, the pool is ready now. Do you want to come get in?" I was like, "Heck yeah, do I want to get in?"
Yeah.
And then maybe in hindsight, it's like, oh, maybe that wasn't the right time to get in. But I was just too like, no, no. Anyway, so I didn't realize our midwife had just plopped mum and dad on the couch. And so that's where they stayed. So they did actually end up staying the whole time, but I didn't know they were there. Because I
Wow.
think in the back of her mind, she was like, oh, maybe she might just want them later. Like,
Yeah.
we'll just park them, put them on
Yeah.
hold.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Don't
then,
talk.
yeah, yeah.
Make no
Um,
sounds.
no. So yeah, God, my I just went into a real spin of moments of just like this is just gonna go forever, and this is really, really hard. And just thinking that I wasn't doing it properly, and it was just like, wow, this is so. I felt so vulnerable, even though I was so safe and in such a good space. And I was like, if I was in hospital right now and someone said, hey, do you want to go have a C-section? I'd be like, yes, please, sign me up. Like
Yeah.
all the interventions, give it to me. And it was just such an amazing, I guess, feeling of being like, oh my God, like I'm right where I need to be. Like
Yeah.
this is
Surrounded
the
by the
best spot.
people
Yeah.
that I need to be. Yeah.
Yeah. So just yeah, everything just felt like it was taking too long. I felt like I was going really kooky. And
Were
uh,
you externalizing any of that? Like, were you voicing all of these doubts of yourself, or was it very much an
yeah.
internal thing?
I think some I voiced, some I didn't. But yeah, everyone was very good. Like, I guess instead of the like, oh no, you're fine, like our midwife just kind of took the role of like, why are you feeling like that? And um, what what can we do to help you? And just trying to like, I guess just bring me back to being like, no, you're doing fine, but making me realize that.
Yeah.
Instead of just being told that I'm fine, because I think that would be really invalidating.
Yeah.
So yeah, she was really good. Of course, the hot water system had run out, so
I was going to say, how are you putting the
yeah,
hot water in the
yeah.
pool?
No, they just kept boiling water, and yeah, little magicians. And our birth photographer was so good. She just really stepped into that role too. And it's just
Yeah.
like, that is not what you were here for. But she was just amazing. She's had 5 babies of her own, and she's just like,
Wow.
I'm here for you. It's all good.
Yeah,
Um,
that's so cool.
Yeah, so then,
So
yeah, the midwife.
is it like 3 a.m. ish or
Yeah, it must have been around because, yeah, it got to a point where I could start hearing birds, and I was like, no way, like it's getting light, and here we all are still. And I
yeah,
also had left my watch on so I could keep looking at the time, which was a big, like, no, like I just should have gotten rid of it. And I don't think
yeah.
anyone realized I had my watch on, and I was being quite stealthy with it because I thought they'd take it off me. So,
Yeah,
so I just,
that's actually so funny because I know that you did a birth story for my friend and her colleague, the Sacred Bubble. They're on Instagram. They're going to be a postnatal midwifery service on the Sunshine Coast. But I saw that your birth story, and one of the first things I noticed was you were wearing your watch.
yes.
But
Yes.
that wasn't very helpful. Is that right?
No, I wouldn't say so. Yeah, yeah, I don't think it was a good thing being
Yeah,
able to know how long everything was going for.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, because you were
yeah,
able to check the time, of course.
yes.
Yeah.
Um,
See, I've listened to another podcast where somebody was like, "Oh no, I definitely wore my watch. I wanted to see like how hard I was exerting myself or something." And
yeah.
she said, like at some point, it said, you're under more stress than usual." And she actually found that quite validating that the watch could
Uh,
pick up that information. But yeah, being able to see the time, yeah, what a mind game.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe for some people it is really good, but yeah, for me it probably
Not
wasn't.
helpful. Yeah,
Yeah, and I definitely recall saying like I was wasting everyone's time, and
yeah,
yeah, really hard on myself. But just yeah, just really felt so vulnerable. Um, and yeah, it got to a point where yeah, the midwife was just very sort of just trying to give me a bit of direction. It's like, you can feel yourself and just see if you can feel anything like membranes, like so because my membranes hadn't ruptured yet, and I could feel um like a squishy ball is
yeah,
yeah what I remember describing it as. And so it was my membranes, and I was just like, oh my god, like it's just taking so long, like it just they sort of come down and then back up, and I was like, righto, like, but at least there's going to be a head right behind it. So as soon as those membranes rupture, there's going to be a head, because it's like that's how it works, right? Like you just
yeah.
that's how it is. Anyway, that's not what happened, and so finally my membranes ruptured, and so even though I was still in water, like you could hear the pop, um,
Wow.
and we're just like, oh yes, like this is it. And I had a lot of back pain at that point, and it definitely helped, but didn't fully get rid of the pain. So like in the back of my mind, I was like, oh my god, she's gone posterior.
Yeah.
But so she hadn't. But
She was just making her way
then
down.
yeah, yeah, she's working it out.
Yeah.
But then so the midwife again was like, do you want to have another feel? Like you might feel a head, and I could feel nothing, and like just space, and I was just like,
Wow.
I don't understand, like where is this child? Like
Yeah.
where has she hidden herself? Because this is not what I was anticipating. I was like, right, we're nearly done here, and now there's nothing. So I sort of said I didn't really want any internal exams. But I think at that point, because I was kind of unraveling, and yeah, maybe the midwife just kind of recognised that our second midwife was there by that point. Um, she offered and to do a VE, and I was like, you know what? Yes. And I think she was really hesitant about it and really wanted me to make sure that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
But I did, and I was just still feeling quite like, I guess, yeah, just I was still in quite some discomfort, and I feel like if you're truly like, I guess, ready to push, that you shouldn't feel that so much. Like anyway, that's yeah. In my mind, I
Yeah.
was like, something just doesn't feel right. So the midwife had a bit of a feel, and she was like, okay, I actually don't think you are fully dilated, and there's just a very little bit of cervix to go, but baby's head is crooked, and that's why you've probably been in a bit more pain. Um,
Yeah.
so she was like, "It's time to get out of the pool." I was like, "No, I don't. I don't think so."
Yeah. This is why we're all here. This is why we've gathered here to have this
yeah.
water birth.
Oh
You don't
God.
understand.
Yeah, and like just everything. I was like, I don't think this is going to work, and that's definitely another point where if they'd said, hey, we've actually called your ambo buddies and they're out the front and you're going to go to hospital, I would have agreed to it. But
Yeah.
they're like, no, we're going to do some different maneuvers. So just that's where the spin babies kind of came back into it,
Yeah.
and that was really challenging.
Yeah.
And then they're like, righto, while you're up, why don't you go to the toilet? It's like, okay. So thankfully someone put a dressing gown on me, and that's where I've turned and seen my parents. Like, what? Where,
No.
Graham? Where are we going? This is
Enjoying the show?
I was just like, oh, righto. But at that point, I just did not care. Like, I was just like, whatever. Like, we'll talk about this later. But
Oh, that's
yeah,
great.
went to the toilet and had the classic, like, huge contraction on the toilet. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. And
Yeah.
the midwives were just sitting there like, yes, we're on the
Yeah.
money.
This is what we wanted.
Yeah, so by
Yeah.
that point it was daylight, and I was like, whoa, this is really taking a while. I was starting to fall asleep in between contractions. I hadn't been able to drink lots of water because I was ended up um, like dry retching a lot after the
Okay.
contractions.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I guess I'd organised all these snacks and different things, and I didn't touch any of them, so I was just exhausted.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, finally could feel her head, and same thing as when the membranes had been coming down, like it just went down and up, down and up, and I was like, "Come on, little lady." I actually had this little word sign thing that we'd made, and somehow while I was pregnant, I think we'd been doing some sort of well, we did a program called the Birth Class, and we'd come up with this slogan of "Patience protects the pussy."
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Of like our little anyway. So
Yeah.
that little sign is sitting there, and I was just like, at this point, I don't care. I don't care if
Yeah.
everything rips in half. I just want this
Yeah.
baby out. And they're like, okay,
Yeah.
that's maybe not the mindset to have. Like, just
Yeah.
remember, peace protects the pussy. So it was just anyway, it was quite funny. But yeah, eventually, her head came out. So
Wow.
wow, okay, like amazing. And I didn't really get like that ring of fire type
Oh my
feeling, I think,
gosh.
because it had been so slow and like so
Wow.
gradual that like everything had just stretched as it should have.
Yeah.
So yeah, her head was out, and then I just was like, what's the story here, friends? Like, what's like this is just feels like it's taking a really long time, and she's just
Yeah.
kind of hanging out there. Anyway,
Yeah.
I was convinced, and this goes against all my knowledge of birth, which was just funny in the moment, but so I could feel her starting to restitute, but in my mind, she was crawling back inside. So I was like, no, she's going back. You're like, she can't do that. Like, it's not. But no,
Ah.
I'm convinced.
Oh
Anyway,
my
so
gosh.
that
So
was
so sorry, you went to the toilet, and so between going to the toilet and this all happening, is that like a relatively short period of time?
maybe like 45 minutes, I would have
Yeah.
to say. Yeah, and I was back in the pool for that.
Yeah. So you went to the
Yeah,
toilet, things kind of turned up, went back to the
yes,
pool. Yeah.
yeah, yes, and then yeah, I
And
think
so
it.
you
Yeah,
felt her so her head come out in the pool, is that correct?
yes, yep,
Yeah.
yeah. So I was, I think the midwife was across from me, and I was like holding onto a towel, kind
Yeah.
of like pulling because we'd tried squatting, I'd tried all fours, and just was getting just didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. So that positioning just seemed to really help open my pelvis up. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, so her head came out, and then felt her trying to turn. And I'm not sure if I ended up stopping her from turning a little, and that kind of bared down because I was so convinced she was going to crawl back to my
Oh
uterus.
my
And I
gosh.
come back.
Do you remember feeling like do you remember what you were feeling like you had that thought, but what were you feeling? Were you like afraid that was going to happen, or like what was going through your
Yeah,
mind?
I think I'm just like a bit stressed and a bit just a bit blown away, maybe, and just not
Yeah.
that I hadn't anticipated that that would take so long
Yeah.
between like those two contractions. So I think, and I was so, yeah, so tired by that point that I
Yeah.
was just like, not, I was not being very rational. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but anyway, so then because of that, when the next contraction came, she didn't move.
Yeah.
Because she hadn't restituted properly. So, like, her shoulders were still sitting, like, not anterior, posterior. They're
Yeah.
still, yeah, kind of more lateral, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, so I guess technically, like, and I sort of had to go back and think about it, but technically that is a dystocia.
Yeah.
And but in my mind, so like I knew that that probably wasn't quite right because it was like the head should have been the hardest part. Like her body kind of should have just flopped out like a lizard. I don't. She's
Yeah.
not a lizard,
Yeah.
but anyway.
Yeah. I think we all get the
Um,
visual.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it just didn't happen. And so I was like, this isn't quite right, but I feel okay. Um, and so the midwife just got me to stand up, and she was very calm. She's like, "Okay, like you just need to stand up. We just need to change your position." Um, and it made for an amazing photo. So like, thanks Olive for that. That the birth photographer got this, yeah, great photo. Anyway, it's all
Make it all worth it.
yeah, and then so all I don't, yeah, she didn't have to do any like internal maneuvers or anything. It was just that position change, and I put my leg up on the side of the pool, and
Yeah.
that was enough. And
Wow.
she came out,
Like a lizard.
and yeah, yeah. So that was a bit funny that like technically her head was born in water, but her body wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at that point, I was just convinced that I'd torn because that felt really explosive and really just like,
Yeah.
I guess because, yeah, she'd needed that bit of help from the midwife. I was just that definitely wasn't what I was kind of anticipating.
Yeah.
There was poo everywhere, and
Yeah.
I was just like, whose is that?
Yeah.
It was
Oh.
hers. So
Yeah.
at some point, she had become a little bit stressed.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there was a lot of meconium in the water, but no one was really worried by it. It was just kind of like, that it was it felt like a very long time, and yeah,
Yeah.
that was quite normal.
Yeah.
Our second midwife did the APGAR score, and she got a 10 straight away, and she's like,
Wow.
I've
Oh
never
my
given a
gosh.
baby 10 at 1 minute. Like they never, but
Wow.
she was ready to be in the world. She was all good.
Yeah. She'd taken
Um,
her sweet time and here
yeah,
she is.
yeah. So,
Ready.
and I mean, really, the whole thing, like from when, like, yeah, when everything had really started to when she was born was still like maybe 12 hours. Like, it wasn't
Yeah.
all that long.
Yeah.
It felt like forever, but,
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely could have been longer. But yeah, so that's, in the scheme of things, it was really it was all good.
Yeah.
But yeah, we just sat in the pool for a little bit, and someone went and got mum and dad, and the birth photographer got photos of them as they were walking through the door, and it was just amazing. Just
Wow.
so, yeah, really like, yeah, in my mind, it was like, oh, our midwife knew, like, she knew that was the right thing to keep them there.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a really beautiful photo of sort of my dad with his hand on my head, and Jock has got
Oh.
his hand on Olive's head, and it's just like, oh my God, like, yeah, just really, really nice that
Oh my
all the
gosh.
dads and their girls. It was, yeah, just really
Yeah.
lovely.
That's so
Um,
beautiful.
yeah,
And so you were sitting in the water and had you birthed a placenta yet?
No, so I think I'm just a bit worried that the water was getting a little bit cool.
Yeah.
So I'd maybe been in, yeah, for about 10 minutes, and like maybe it's time to get out. Um, so sort of did that, and I just felt a bit of cramping as I was walking over to our bed, and I was like, oh, so someone went and got the placenta bucket,
Yeah.
and I didn't realise that they can come out actually quite easily after having a baby. So I kind of like really gave a bit of oomph to it and didn't need to. So all of a sudden there's placenta on the floor, there's blood on the walls. There's just like it was like a rocket ship. It just
oh my gosh
came out. So anyway, then poor Dad is there with a mop, just we
mopping
found
up
blood
the
on the
blood.
walls like weeks later.
Oh my
wow.
gosh.
Our poor second midwife ended up having to have a shower and like we had to give her a change of clothes.
Oh my gosh, that's brilliant.
And it was
I
like,
mean, she'll never forget it.
no, and it's just funny because I guess people are like, oh, birthing at home is so messy, and it's like, no, it's really not. Like, you know, they packed up the pool, and it's like, but that side of it, yes, that was quite messy.
Yeah,
we did.
I feel like that's the part that I would least expect, because I guess it's just maybe not usually coming out so forcefully.
Yeah, that's certainly something I've learned.
Yeah.
Just a gentle cough would have been fine, but yeah. But no, so it came out. Yeah, I think that was within 20 minutes of her being born. And then we just thankfully, current me thanked past me for making chicken curry, so we ate that for breakfast. And
excellent.
I was definitely very exhausted, and just I remember having conversations at that point and not being aware at all. And just feeling very shaky, and I think mainly just exhausted. But so
what was Olive's weight?
She was 4.16.
Nice.
So big chunky gal.
Ready to take on the world.
Yes. And then the midwives, they were just so lovely, and so one of them just came and sat in the bathroom while I had a shower, and she's like, people faint in the shower and you're not doing that, like there's no point going to hospital now. So that was all good, and just felt amazing after that, and that was good just for Jock to have some time with Olive. I ended up not tearing at all. I just had a small graze. So
amazing.
that was nice, because that was certainly a fear of mine, having to transfer after birth. Which it's just like, oh, you've gone and done all this hard work, and then you have to go in just for suturing. Would feel quite. That was something that I just really didn't want to have happen, so that was nice. And then it was just the midwives left. Mum and Dad hung around and did some loads of washing, and then they left, and it was just so nice.
Incredible. Hi everyone, Elsie here editing again. As we all know, babies and children are unpredictable, and little Olive woke up, so Ilona had to leave her cuss studio. Ilona's last comments were around how nourished and cared for she and Jock felt in the days and weeks after the birth of Olive, which is so great to hear, as we all know how turbulent and almost forgotten the postnatal period can be. I really enjoyed listening to Ilona's story of the birth of Olive, especially because Ilona is in a profession that sees high-risk emergencies all the time, but that didn't stop her. I hope you've enjoyed listening to the second episode of the Birthing at Home podcast. I have many more episodes to come, so don't forget to follow along by clicking follow on whatever podcast host you're listening to this on, or by following the Instagram, where you can also message me to share your birth at home story on the podcast. And finally, as always, I've left some episode notes in the episode description, so please check them out. And stay tuned for episode 3.